Okay, this is February 23rd, 2015. Situation here, it was County Zoning Board of Appeals review, it's County Zoning Case Issue 714, Pleasant Ridge Energy LLC, Pleasant Ridge Energy Project. Michael Cornell here, John Ditson here, Richard Kehoe, Diana Iverson here, Howard Zimmerman here, Joan Huesman here, Gates Nielsen. Cool.
All right, thank you. I believe this evening we have Mr. Punch back with us for some additional questions that we had with him. So with that, we'll go ahead and just get started. Mr. Punch, I just want to remind you that you are still under oath from your previous testimony. So with that, Mr. Glazer, you may continue. Mr. Lucan has something.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I think we talked about this a number of weeks ago after Mr. Punch originally testified, was UCLC Exhibit 101. I don't remember if we handed it out or not. I made another 15 copies just in case we did or didn't. Okay. But at this time, we would ask that be admitted into evidence based on what happened.
All right. So let the records indicate the county at this point will accept UCLC Exhibit 101. Looks like it's an email from Mr. Lucahan, or from Mr. Punch to Mr. Lucahan's, subject to supplementary statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Punch, did you review anything since last month in preparation for your testimony tonight?
Yes.
What did you review?
I reviewed part of my deposition on certain parts of it. I reviewed what I think is the article by Crichton et al. That you brought up. You asked me if I had seen the article. I had not. I think it came out in November, and I had not seen it yet. I found it, and I think it is the correct article. I made some annotated comments here. If you still have questions, I'd like to rely on some of those.
I don't know that, but when you said you referred to your deposition, I assume what you meant was you
Not deposition, my
testimony.
My testimony.
Okay.
I really didn't. I reviewed a few articles that were in my list of references, but not very many of them. I just had some thoughts of my own that I thought maybe could come up, but I can't point to anything more specifically than that.
Okay. Do you have your presentation there with you either?
I have it on the computer.
Okay. If you could turn to your slide 31. And this is where the slide where you talk about what and where is the evidence for adverse health impacts from wind turbines.
Yes.
And one of the things that you identify, one of your bullet points, is expert testimony in legal proceedings in USA and other countries and related public comments. You see that?
Yes.
Right. And last month, I asked you a little bit about this particular bullet, and you said that you didn't bring any of those materials with you because it's too tedious. Do you remember that?
I would say I said something like that, yes.
Okay.
Each one of those is a collated set.
Okay.
Mr. Punch, I've put several items from those legal proceedings on the table there for you. And actually, the first one, oddly enough, isn't on the stack I just handed out. It's an exhibit that's already in this record. And it's Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 56. So I want to start with Pierpont first. Exhibit 56 is from the Thule, it's T-U-L-E, wind project in California, where Pierpont's opinions were, or theory was rejected. Is that one of the legal proceedings that you referred to in your slide 31?
No, I was trying to show that there's a range of evidence in some of the testimony that I've been part of in hearings in Wisconsin, for example, in Ohio, and through stories that I've heard through other people who have been experts. Again, I was relating, making a general statement that I know there's testimony indicating that others also think there are adverse health effects from wind turbine noise. I'm aware, very much aware, Mr. Blazer, that there is testimony on the opposite side.
Well, this in particular, what I'm focusing on here is...
Are you asking me to look at this?
No, I'm asking if that proceeding where Dr. Pierpont's theory was rejected is one of the legal proceedings that's part of what you referred to in slide 31.
Not specifically, no.
Okay. Then if we could go to the next one on the list, or if you could just flip that one over. They're all in order. This could go, I have a feeling this is going to go pretty quickly. The next one is Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 280, which is a proceeding before the Ontario Environmental Review Tribunal, which also rejected Pierpont and prohibited her from testifying. Is that one of the legal proceedings that you referred to?
Could we, instead of Mr. Blazer, who ends up testifying as to what's in this report, I think the first question is whether he relied upon it and whether he's seen it. It shouldn't be Mr. Blazer testifying as to what it says and somehow backdooring this into the record.
Mr. Cornell, I'm simply, since he identified in his presentation expert testimony in legal proceedings in USA and other countries and related public comments, I think it's fair to ask him if any of these are part of what he's relying on.
And I agree. It's the characterization by you of what they stand for that I have the problem with. If he wants to ask the question, I have no problem with that. It's the him testifying as to what it says that's my concern.
Oh, okay, so let's do this. This is super simple.
Yep.
Why don't he just look at this? If he used that one, yes or no. If he says yes, you can question him further. If he says no,
I'll move on.
Perfect.
All right. Well, going back to that 280, Mr. Punch, have you ever seen this opinion from the Environmental Review Tribunal involving the Reitman case?
I've not read this, no.
Have you ever seen it?
I don't believe I have.
Okay.
I've looked at an awful lot of documents. I'm aware that, for example, Dr. Pierpont's testimony was rejected in one or more places, and she was not allowed to be a witness.
Right.
Okay.
That probably gets us as far as we need to go. Let's look at the next one then on the stack there. Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 87, which is a decision from a federal judge in California in the matter of Protect Our Communities Foundation versus Jewell, J-E-W-E-L-L. Have you ever seen that one before?
No, this is very reminiscent of the pile of articles you showed me earlier. There's a lot of things I have been vaguely familiar, I'm vaguely aware of, but I've not really read. I'm aware there's arguments on both sides. There's piles of testimony. If you brought it in here, it's back up to the ceiling on either side of the argument.
Right now, I'm just asking you about these.
No.
So, you haven't seen this one before?
I have not.
Next one is Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 290. This one involves Mr. Shepard. It's from, Mr. Shepard that you rely on, he's from Australia, right?
What's his first name?
I actually don't know.
I read his articles in literature by Shepard.
Okay.
I believe he is Australia. I get Australia and New Zealanders confused sometimes. If you're asking, is this the document you're referring to? It doesn't have a number on it.
This one should say Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 290, maybe
Oh,
in
yes.
the lower. Okay.
Yes.
And it's from the Meridian Energy proceeding in New Zealand. And have you ever seen that one before?
I don't think so.
Okay. Next one. Well, one of the people that you rely on, before we go to that one, just a couple of preliminary questions first, Mr. Punch, if I may. There's somebody that you rely on in your presentation named Nissenbaum, Nissenbaum. Is that correct?
Michael Nissenbaum.
Right. And among other things, you rely on him specifically for your recommendations regarding turbine setbacks, right?
Right. He had a recommendation that I did repeat, I think,
Okay.
in one of my slides. Based on the distances that he actually studied in his particular investigation.
Okay. Speaking of, actually, do you have your, it's UCLC Exhibit 101, that email that your attorney introduced?
Yes, I have a copy here. Yes.
And you say here, I mean, there's a second full paragraph, it's the larger paragraph. And in the middle of that paragraph, you see there's a line there that starts, alternatively, a barrier can be placed.
I do.
Yes. All right. Just for the record, I'll read it so we know what we're talking about. Alternatively, a barrier can be placed near or around the receptor, which is the example I gave in my answer, indicating that many people seek protection by attempting to sleep in their basements to improve their chances for a better night's sleep. As I also indicated, infrasound is not easily mitigated by concrete walls, even underground concrete walls. None of these options are practically effective when infrasound is involved. And I guess the question I have is, you do agree that the other type of sound, the sound that's at levels above infrasound, can effectively be soundproofed. Soundproofing will work on.
They can either be muffled or attenuated depending on the frequency. The higher the frequency, the easier it is to attenuate the sound.
Okay. And you say here that infrasound is not easily mitigated. Are you saying it's impossible to mitigate it?
Well, I think in practical terms, in terms of the way houses are built, it's probably impractical and impossible. I mean, I'm basing this on some personal knowledge of, not only my knowledge of acoustics as it is, but with some experiences of people I have interviewed and met and talked to, who have tried to sleep in their basements. And some people have put up mattresses against the walls. One person had a fortified basement with a safe that would have an extra layer of concrete around it for whatever reason before the turbines came in, and he had to leave his house.
Well, I assume you don't have experience with home soundproofing, is that correct?
No, I don't do architectural acoustics in that sense.
Okay. And by practically effective, do you mean that it might cost too much?
Well, what's feasible in terms of, well, yeah, affordability would be one thing. I suppose a very extensively, a very thick wall that came close to about maybe a third or a fourth of the wavelength of the sound would do it. I figured once that if this is a correct assumption, a correct piece of information, that based on what I read earlier in the acoustics text, it would take about 300 feet of concrete to actually mitigate 1 hertz.
Okay.
To be unnoticeable.
Are you familiar with programs for soundproofing homes around airports?
Not personally. I mean, I'm aware of attenuation strategies for attenuating sound in homes around neighborhoods, around highways, and that sort of thing.
But not around airports. You don't know about those programs?
I'm not intimately aware of those, no.
Okay. Let's go back to this about again. He's a radiologist, right?
That's my understanding, yes.
He's not a neurologist or an ENT?
No.
Okay. And you do recall he's a member of the advisory board of the Society for Wind Vigilance. Does that ring a bell?
I believe he was on that list.
Yes. All right, the next one there on the stack there is Pleasant Ridge 288. That's another Ontario Environmental Review Tribunal decision where the plaintiff's named Erickson, E-R-I-C-K-S-E-N. Is that one of the legal proceedings that you referred to in slide 31 of your presentation?
No. Again, I didn't refer to anything specifically in my presentation. I was giving a range of things that I was relying on.
Okay, so have you ever seen that one before?
No.
All right. Then the next one, also related to Nissenbaum, is Pleasant Ridge 293, McKinnon, M-C-K-I-N-N versus Rural Municipality of Martin. Have you ever seen that one before?
Is that 293 you said?
293, yes.
No, I'm guessing there are hundreds of these that I've probably not seen. And hundreds on the other side maybe, but I've seen some.
Another person that you rely extensively on in your presentation is a Dr. McMurtry, capital M-C, capital M-U-R-T-R-Y.
Robert McMurtry.
Right. And actually, there's a good 10, 11, 12 pages of your presentation that's based on what his work. Is that correct?
I don't know how many pages. There's several. There's more than a couple.
Okay. And he's developed what you refer to as diagnostic criteria that can be used to diagnose wind turbine syndrome. Is that your position?
He's been careful not to call it that, actually. It's gotten a pretty bad rap in these kinds of hearings in various settings. He talks about symptoms of people who live in the environments of wind turbines. But basically, it's the same thing.
And McMurtry is an orthopedic surgeon?
I believe he is, yes.
Not a neurologist?
Pretty sure he's not.
Not an expert on sleep disorders?
I don't think he cast himself as an expert on sleep.
Not an epidemiologist?
No, as you say, he's an orthopedic surgeon. He's developed a number of his own techniques for orthopedic surgery.
Right. And he's one of the founders of the Society for Wind Vigilance. You're aware of that, right?
I wasn't aware. Maybe he was on the list, and I'll take your word if he is. It doesn't bother me that he is.
Okay. Are you also aware that he's a board member of a group known as Alliance to Protect Prince Edward County? Does that ring a bell?
I think I read that in his bio at one point.
And are you aware that one of the organization's guiding principles is to participate directly in campaigns opposing individual wind projects and help to seek regulatory changes?
I haven't read that.
And last month, if you remember this, you said that McMurtry has a good reputation as a health expert in Canada. Do you remember that?
I think he does.
All right. Do you have Pleasant Ridge 287 there? And that's another Ontario Environmental Review Tribunal proceeding. The party name is Platinum Produce.
I have 285 next on my stack.
287 should be.
Oh, no, I go from two. Oh, I thought we already talked about that.
Yep, there you
Oh, I was looking over here for the next four.
You do have 287 there?
Yes, and I've answered your question about whether I've seen it or not.
Well, actually, I was asking you about a different one, but have you ever seen 287 before?
No.
All right. The next one then is 285. And that's another Ontario Environmental Review Tribunal proceeding. The party there is Bovaird, B-O-V-A-I-R-D. Have you ever seen that one before?
Not in this format, no. I don't think I've seen it before.
Have you ever heard of the case before?
I'm aware of, again, in generalities, I've never testified in Canada. I've talked to others who have. I'm aware a lot's been happening there with wind turbine development. I haven't seen this particular report that I recall.
I think we just
One more.
shot past the last one.
I have one more.
Oh, okay, look at
I'm not
that.
anxious to talk about it, but if you want to talk about it.
I have a feeling you're not interested in talking about that one, but
Not Jeff Leventhal, no.
we'll get to that one in a minute. Do you have your, this is Pleasant Ridge 292, your 2010 article that you wrote along with Richard James in Audiology Today? Do you have that one there? You don't?
It's somewhere on my...
Let me grab it. I'll just give you this
I
back.
don't have it with me otherwise.
And if you could go to page 25 of that article. And while you're looking at that, just so we can confirm, Leventhal is one of the people that you rely on in your presentation in this proceeding, right?
Rely on, I think I...
Cite, quote, refer to.
I think I did mention him once or twice.
Okay.
I'm on page 25 now.
Okay. And it's the... the one that starts, Dr. Jeff Leventhal, a British scientist. Do you see where I'm
I see
referring
it.
to? And what you wrote here is, and his colleagues, Way et al., etc., have documented the detrimental effects of low-frequency noise exposure. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then in the next paragraph, again, you're referring to Leventhal in your article. And you say, Leventhal 2003. And actually, if you go to, before we go there, if you go to your slide 39 in your presentation in this manner.
Okay.
You say sleep disturbance, most well-documented symptom, and one of your references is Leventhal 2003. Is that
Yes, I
correct?
have one here.
Okay. So going back to then Exhibit 292, your Audiology Today article, you say here, Leventhal, in reviewing the literature on the effects of exposure to low-frequency noise, found no evidence of hearing loss, but substantial evidence of vibration of bodily structures, chest vibration, annoyance, especially in homes, perceptions of unpleasantness, pressure on the eardrum, etc., etc. Do you see all that?
And sleep disturbance.
Right, right. You do know that Dr. Leventhal has rejected this as a misrepresentation of his research, right?
I'm not surprised. I didn't know that now.
All right, well, now you can go to 299, which is the last thing in the stack that I left for you there.
Should I keep this?
You can put it aside for now. We may refer to it later. And Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 299 is Dr. Leventhal's testimony before the Wisconsin Public Service Commission. Do you see that?
Yes,
Have you ever seen that before?
I have.
You have read that?
I read it months ago. Yes, actually years ago. I think it was years ago. Let me see.
Okay.
I don't know what the date is on this. I also testified in that case, I think, in that hearing, and I read most of the depositions. I did read this one.
Okay. So then you are aware that Dr. Leventhal rejects both Pierpont's hypothesis and the reliance by anyone on the notion, on these notions regarding vibration effects.
Yeah, he rejects almost any effects of wind turbine noise.
Okay. All right, let's go back for a minute to this, your email to Mr. Lucahan's Exhibit 101.
Okay.
You have that?
Yes.
And I think part of your discussion here is about something called the Brown County Board of Health in Wisconsin. Is that correct?
Correct.
It's the paragraph that starts, it is, or it's the part that starts, it is my opinion.
Is that next to the last paragraph?
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
And you refer here to acoustical measurements with instrumentation designed for infrasonic testing that revealed significant infrasound emissions at distances of up to 4 miles. Do you see that?
Correct.
Okay. And just to get some basic facts first, what kind of wind turbines are you talking about in Brown County?
This was, I don't know the brand name. They were commercial industrial scale turbines. My recollection is they were around 1.5 per turbine.
Well, if I told you that they are Nordex 2.5
Nordex, yes.
2.5 megawatt turbines,
Okay.
does that ring a bell?
Bigger than, yes. Okay.
And do you recall that they have a total height of 492 feet?
That sounds right.
And clearly they're not General Electric 1.7 turbines, right?
Right.
Okay. All right, back to what you say here about Brown County. You said that this Board of Health declared the Shirley Wind Project a human health hazard. You see that?
Yes.
Okay. What declaration are you talking about?
The Brown County Department of Health, Board of Health, declared in, I believe, November of last year, that based on all the evidence presented in this case in which Leventhal, I, and numerous other people and members of the community testified, and that there indeed was a problem, largely based on the measurements of noise or infrasound done. I think the study was done by 5 acousticians, Ambrose, the 2 Hesslers, David and George. I believe Bob Thorne, but I'm not sure. He was, and Shulman, Paul Shulman, for sure.
Have you actually seen this declaration that you're referring to?
I actually only read about it in the newspaper, but it was presumably a declaration. I read it in a couple of different newspapers online.
So you haven't...
I have not seen the declaration, no, from the board.
And has this Board of Health passed some sort of an ordinance about this issue?
I think their decision was, as I understand it, their decision is that it's up now to the wind company to prove that it's not a hazard.
What's your understanding based on?
That's what the accounts said. And there were some quotes in these newspaper articles from the Board of Health. They were, at least they were, you know, had quote marks.
What I'm asking you, though, is are you aware of any ordinance that has been passed by the Brown County Board of Health with respect to these 2.5 megawatt turbines?
Any ordinance?
Yes.
No, not per se.
Okay. You do know that those turbines are still operating?
Yes, I understand they are. Nothing's happened since then, as far as I know.
So as far as you know, nobody has issued any kind of a directive that those turbines have to stop operating, is that right?
I don't think the wind company has decided what it can or wants to do.
That's not my question, though, sir. My question is, as far as you know, has anyone issued any kind of a directive that these turbines are supposed to stop operating?
I don't know.
All right. Do you know who Judy Friedrichs is? That's Friederichs.
Don't think I've heard the name.
Right, this one, I'm going to destroy the pronunciation. It's Chua, C-H-U-A, Xiong, X-I-O-N-G. Do you know who that person is?
X-I-O-N-G is kind of a last name.
It is. I'm just wondering if you've ever heard of the...
I've probably seen the name. I don't know what you're referring to, so I can't say that I know the person.
Let me try it differently. Has Brown County's local health officer issued an order finding any kind of a public health hazard from these 2.5 megawatt turbines?
I don't know what she has or he has, per se, no. I don't know, I mean, I don't know who was in charge of making the determination and putting out the information that appeared in these newspaper articles to say that the Brown County is a health hazard. To show the wind farm.
And has the public health officer issued any kind of an abatement order as far as you know?
What?
An abatement order, an order granting that the town is stopped.
No, they have
I
not.
think that's asked and answered 2 or 3 times.
No, I asked about the Board of Health, and I'm asking about the public health
No,
officer.
you asked whether anybody has ordered it to be stopped. It's the same question. He said not to his knowledge, so obviously the public health officer would be the same answer.
All right. Are you aware that Rick James was also had involvement with whatever this process has been in Brown County?
I am.
Okay.
Yes.
And you've known him for some time, right?
For at least 15 years.
He contributed to Nina Pierpont's book.
I think she asked him to read a pre-publication copy. I don't know how much she depended on him. I didn't know him at that point. He was doing that without my knowledge, but...
Well, he was your co-author on that audiology.
Oh, of course, I know him very well. I worked with him in many different respects, in many ways, but...
I think we lost
Are you
the...
suggesting that he was more than a reviewer for the article, I mean, for the book? I'm not sure what your question is.
We can move on. He was your co-author on your Audiology Today article, the exhibit.
Yes, and I'm very proud to say he was.
Okay. And he's also a member of the board of the Society for Wind Vigilance, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's switch gears for just a minute. You mentioned Schomer before. In one of your slides, I think it's slide 43, you talk about the fact that Schomer believes motion sickness to be similar to AHEs, and that's your shorthand. What are AHEs again?
It's simply an abbreviation for adverse health effects.
Okay. Schomer believes motion sickness to be similar to AHEs caused by IWT infrasound, even though only acoustic energy involved. And that relates to Mr. Schomer's reliance on the Navy studies where they physically shook people, right?
I think so, yes.
Okay. And Pierpont relies on vibration theory as well. Do you recall that?
Yes.
All right. And then, could you pull up your slide 35? And that's where you list the symptoms of wind turbine syndrome, and one of them, number 3, visceral vibratory vestibular disturbance, VVVD.
Yes.
And so you also think that this motion sickness is a symptom of wind turbine syndrome, right?
You know, the truth is, I believe it now more than I believed it then. Okay? Based on other evidence.
And you and Mr. James and Ms. Pierpont all rely on the work of Dr. Neil Todd to support your theory, right?
I mean,
Yes.
at the point, yes.
Yes, it's fine for now.
Yes, okay.
And you refer to him, as a matter of fact, in Pleasant Ridge 292, the Audiology Today article that you wrote with Mr. James, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you know the next question, because I think you've been asked it before. You do know that Dr. Todd, who you rely on, has rejected your interpretation of his research, right?
I know he's rejected Pierpont's book's interpretation. I didn't know that he rejects my interpretation.
Have you read his rejection of this VVVD theory?
I've read that he rejected it. I'm not sure I read a complete statement. I don't know if he wrote an article or... I'm aware that he rejected it.
Let me see if I can refresh you a bit, because this has been quoted in a number of different places. That really big fat one, 56, which is that Thule wind proceeding. The one with the tabs in it, I put those tabs in there for you. And the tab I want you to turn to is page 2.7-12. Actually, let me make it easier for you, if I can find it.
It's on top, I think. Is there a page number?
At the bottom, you'll see 2.7-12. And actually, I put a tab in there for you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay. And you'll see there's a paragraph there that starts, the work of Dr. Pierpont relied heavily on the research of Dr. Neil Todd from the Faculty of Life Science at University of Manchester, who recently reprimanded Pierpont for her misinterpretation and use of his research. Dr. Pierpont's wind turbine syndrome theory has incorrectly sought to insert airborne noise issues into a paper that is entirely about vibration through direct contact with the skull. Dr. Todd states the following concerning Pierpont's interpretation of his research, and this is the part that I want to focus on to see if this is what you've heard before. And this is quoting Dr. Todd. Our research is being cited to support the case that wind turbine syndrome is related to a disturbance of vestibular apparatus produced by low-frequency components of the acoustic radiations from wind turbines. Our work does not provide the direct evidence suggested. We described a sensitivity of the vestibular system to low-frequency vibration of the head through direct physical contact at about 100 hertz and not air-conducted sound. That's what you've heard or read before, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So let's move on from Brown County then. Let's go to your slide 71. Let me know when you're there.
Okay.
And this is your example for what you call poor sighting of wind turbines.
Yes.
And when you referred to this slide last month, you said one of the houses belongs to an individual named Carrie Schineldecker. It's Schineldecker near Ludington, Michigan. Is that correct?
In Mason County, yes.
That's right. And it's your opinion that he was suffering from wind turbine syndrome?
It is.
You've met personally with Mr. Schineldecker?
I've met him a
Okay.
couple times.
You're aware that he's an industrial design engineer? He's in his early 50s.
Sounds right. I didn't ask, but
His wife's a teacher, right?
I don't know.
Okay. You have
Her
met
name's
her?
Karen, but
Right.
I don't think I've met her.
Karen Schineldecker? Right. And you're aware that Mr. Schineldecker has been very vocal about his complaints about the wind turbines near his house, right?
Absolutely.
Right. He's posted his complaints on the internet?
He has.
And you've talked to him about his complaints?
Yes.
And I'm going to list some of these. You let me know if these are some of the ones you've talked to him about. Sleep disturbance or sleep deprivation, you recall that?
For sure, yes.
Tinnitus, that's T-I-N-N-I-T.
I believe, but he's talked to me about his wife's symptoms, which I can't differentiate them right now. I don't remember.
Ear pressure,
I believe so.
routine headaches,
I don't know how often, but he has headaches.
diagnosed with ocular migraine headaches,
I don't recall that.
anxiety,
Oh, I would say, just based on conversations in general, yes. He left his home for a while. He didn't leave his home, but he's brought lawsuits and I think he's in terrible condition.
routine awakenings,
Yes, that sounds right.
heart racing,
Either he or his wife, yes.
his wife grinding teeth. Do you recall that? If you don't, that's okay.
Not specific.
All right. Depression,
Yes.
home unable to sell in 2 years on market. Do you remember that?
I think that's absolutely true.
Okay.
I just checked on that when we wrote another article recently.
Right. And I suppose it wouldn't be surprising that someone who publishes complaints like that about a home on the internet is going to have a hard time selling that house, right?
Well, that may be true too.
Right. Do you know what obstructive sleep apnea is?
I I know sleep apnea is I don't know the medical aspects of sleep apnea. I know that it's a breathing issue. While you're sleeping, you stop breathing, essentially, and adults can have it as well as young children. Obstructive would be related to the fact that the pulmonary system can't get air. It might be a neurological issue as well.
Are you aware that one of the symptoms of obstructive sleep apnea is excessive daytime sleepiness?
Sure. I mean,
Loud snoring? Loud snoring? You're aware of that?
that makes sense.
Observed episodes of breathing cessation during sleep?
Absolutely, yes.
Abrupt awakenings accompanied by shortness of breath?
Are we assuming in these questions that he has obstructive?
I'm just asking you if you're aware of those symptoms being associated with obstructive sleep.
They all make sense given what I do know about it.
Okay. Awakening with a dry mouth or sore throat?
That would be associated with mouth breathing, I assume, if it's true.
Okay. Awakening with chest pain?
Not specifically.
Morning headache?
Again, I'm not a medical doctor, Mr. Blazer. I'm not familiar with all the symptoms. I'm familiar generally with what sleep apnea is.
All right, well, let's try a different one. Do you know what TMJ is? Temporomandibular joint disorder?
Joint disorder, yes.
Mr. Cornell, I think we're killing the young lady here. That Mr. Blazer could actually let him finish since he was already halfway through and he's just over talking. I think that'd be appropriate.
I'll control myself. Let's try that one again, so she doesn't skewer me. TMJ, temporomandibular joint disorder, correct?
I'm familiar with it.
All right. And do those symptoms include pain or tenderness of the jaw?
Yes, I think so.
Aching pain in and around the ear?
Yeah, we're talking about this joint right here near the ear. The mandible is the lower jawbone. Yes.
Aching facial pain?
Certainly would be.
Okay. Now, I believe you said last month that at least some of your presentation in this proceeding was developed as a result of having read the testimony in this proceeding from Dr. Ellen Bogan and Dr. Roberts. Is that correct?
I did read those, yes. It's been a while, but I read them.
And the evidence from Drs. Roberts and Ellen Bogan is part of what you said your presentation would respond to. Is that right? Do you remember that?
I don't recall saying it, but I'm not surprised if I did say it.
But let's be clear. It's the January 21st transcript, Phil, starting at page 1354, line 12. Okay, so I want to address basically 7 questions. These were largely developed as a result of my having read what I'll call the deposition testimony of Drs. Roberts and Ellen Bogan. Different hearings call for different kinds of information, but these are the ones that I think were emphasized and which I think I can respond to in a reasonable kind of way. You remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. And you know that Dr. Ellen Bogan, based on your review of his testimony, it was a deposition testimony in this case. Okay. You know that Dr. Ellen Bogan conducted independent medical examinations of some Michigan residents complaining of wind turbine syndrome, right?
Right.
Okay. And did you read Dr. Ellen Bogan's testimony regarding his determination that the people he examined had pre-existing conditions that included obstructive sleep apnea, abnormal heart rhythm, TMJ, change in sleep patterns due to a change in employment, mood disorder, high blood pressure, neuropathy, alcoholism, and misdosing of medication?
I read that.
Okay. And two of the people he examined included a 53-year-old industrial designer and a 45-year-old high school teacher. Do you remember that?
Not specifically, no.
This would be from November 18, when Dr. Punch and Dr. Ellen Bogan testified. Phil, it starts at page 234, line 19. The first is and this is Dr. Ellen Bogan testifying. The first is a 53-year-old industrial designer who raised a concern, of insomnia and of palpitations in their chest, boom, 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 at night, and was absolutely convinced that the wind turbine near his house was causing the medical or these 2 problems. And I won't bore you with all the details, but suffice it to say, in talking with him in great detail, He had in recent years gained a lot of weight, snoring, witness apnea, meaning his wife had seen him gasp and stop breathing in the middle of the night. This gentleman absolutely had obstructive sleep apnea. As a follow-up, by the way, I mentioned the racing heart. He did end up seeing a doctor who did measure, I think it was a 24-hour or 48-hour electrocardiogram that showed abnormal heart rhythm that did not relate to the wind turbine. You remember reading that testimony from Dr. Ellenbogen?
I remember reading it.
Okay. Next, referring to this 45-year-old high school teacher. This is Phil on page 236, starting at line 20. The next is a 45-year-old high school teacher, and she said, I have a constellation of symptoms, not unlike wind turbine syndrome. Perhaps that very thing. Headaches, sleepiness, anxiety, forgetfulness, poor mood, and it's all because of the wind turbine just down the street. When I spoke with her at length, examined her, and I could feel on her exam from her headaches, I mean she had real pain. Discomfort where the mandible meets the skull, sometimes called temporomandibular joint. She had very classic symptoms of TMJ. And finally, for her mood, we talked a lot about her life. And my board certification as a neurologist is from the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. And so we talked about her mood in great detail, and she became instantly tearful when we hit her children, who had just moved out to college, and she felt a deep sense of loss to her. What some people call empty nest syndrome, or the fact that she was somewhat estranged from her kids who went off to college. And so I think she had probably a mood disorder provoked by life circumstances. Do you remember reviewing that testimony, Dr. Punch?
I do, and I was mystified by it.
Have you yourself ever participated in an independent medical examination of Mr. Schineldecker or his wife?
Well, I'm not a medical doctor, so I could not do a medical examination.
Last month you talked about the fact that the extreme anti-wind tactics of Nina Pierpont's husband, Calvin Martin, don't help her. Do you remember that?
That's my opinion, that I don't see how I could help her.
Do you think these people who describe themselves as wind warriors, like Pierpont and her husband, actually care about what's really wrong with people like Mr. Schineldecker or his wife, or are they just using folks like that to further their own political goals?
Objection. Since that's not in evidence, I don't think there's any evidence that Ms. Pierpont considers herself a wind warrior. What her husband has, we've kind of gone through a couple times and we haven't allowed because of his...
I'll rephrase the question, I'm sorry. Do you think people like Pierpont and her husband actually care about what's really wrong with people like Mr. Schineldecker or his wife? Or are they just using those folks to further their own political goals?
To the first part of your question, yes. To the second part, no.
Okay. I'm going to give you another copy of this because it's probably not up there. This is Pleasant Ridge 275. It's the excerpts from Pierpont's book. We went over this a little bit last month, but I just want to just kind of set the context. If you go to page 38, under methods,
Okay.
in the second paragraph there, she says, limited medical records were provided by the adults of families A and B, A1, A2, B1, B2, and by a young man in family C, C4. I requested records for all families through F, but since no more were forthcoming, I stopped asking and pursued those parts of the study not dependent on physical examination or test results, and for which I had a uniform study tool, the interview. You remember we went over this
Right.
last month? Okay.
I don't know if we went into this paragraph, but
Okay.
we talked about the book somewhat.
All right. So she stopped asking about medical histories. And let's see if we might be able to figure out why she stopped asking about medical records. The excerpt now, if you could go to page 42. and it's the section entitled Baseline Conditions. And I'd like you to follow along with me on what she says the pre-existing conditions of these people that she said had wind turbine syndrome had. 8 adult subjects had current or history of serious medical illness, including lupus, breast cancer, diabetes, coronary artery disease, hypertension, atrial fibrillation with anticoagulation, Parkinson's disease, ulcer, and fibromyalgia. Going to the next paragraph. 7 subjects had histories of mental health disorders, including depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and bipolar disorder. You with me so far?
Yes.
Next paragraph. 8 subjects had pre-existing migraine disorder, including 2 with previous severe sporadic headaches that I interpreted as migraine. Next paragraph, excuse me.
Was that word minor or migraine, you said?
Migraine.
Okay.
Did I say migraine? Okay, I thought I said
I heard migraine.
headaches that I interpreted as migraine. Next paragraph. 8 subjects had permanent hearing impairments defined subjectively or objectively, including mild losses limited to one ear, or impairments of binaural processing. And what's binaural processing?
Just simply hearing with 2 ears.
Okay. Next paragraph. 6 subjects had continuous tinnitus or a history of multiple discrete episodes of tinnitus prior to exposure. Do you see that?
Yes.
And again, we're talking about all these conditions that all these people had before the wind turbines, right?
Sounds like it, yes.
Okay. Next paragraph. 12 subjects had significant previous noise exposure, defined as working in noisy industrial or construction settings, working on or in a diesel boat, truck, bus, farm equipment, or aircraft, a military tour of duty, or operating lawnmowers and chainsaws for work. Correct?
Yes, that's what she
Okay.
says.
Next paragraph, we're at the bottom of page 43. 18 subjects were known to be motion sensitive prior to exposure, as defined by car sickness as a child or adult, any episode of seasickness, or a history of 2 or more episodes of vertigo. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it was in this context that Pierpont invented the phrase wind turbine syndrome, correct?
I don't think she invented it in this context.
Well, she's the one, I'm sorry.
I'd like to answer more fully, if I'm
Sure, go ahead.
We all live our lives, we all get old, and we all become a little more vulnerable as we get older. The World Health Organization says when you take people who have these conditions, chronic health conditions, and add noise, they're not even talking about just wind turbine noise, they're going to get worse. Young children, older people, and people with chronic health conditions. Autism, I think, is mentioned in some articles. I don't think the World Health Organization talks about autism per se, but it doesn't surprise me that people have, whether Ellenbogen said it or Pierpont said it, that people have pre-existing conditions. If they leave the turbine area, they get a little better, or completely better, in terms of the kinds of symptoms that have been added on top of these conditions. Well, thank you for allowing me to
Absolutely.
answer.
If I had tried to stop you, Mr. Cornell would have cut me off anyway. But I believe we confirmed last month that the phrase wind turbine syndrome did not exist before Pierpont came up with it, right?
That's correct, and that's the reason, if I may go back to something we said earlier, that's the reason I call it definitive. She simply defined it as a term.
All right. Do you disagree with Dr. Ellenbogen's medical diagnosis that the people that he examined had serious but treatable medical problems that were not being treated because they had been convinced that they have wind turbine syndrome?
You know, I have no basis to deny his medical credentials, his findings.
Okay.
I was mystified by the fact that he did not mention something that I heard him say in another presentation earlier. And that is when one sleeps, during certain stages of sleep, the ears are always open. Hearing is always available, particularly for stimuli that are novel, are new, are strange, and potentially threatening. And he did not say that in his testimony.
And do you disagree with his assessment that, based on his medical diagnosis, that whoever it was that convinced the people that he examined that they had Wing-Turban syndrome was, that this was a huge disservice to those people?
What part of it was a huge disservice? Not being treated?
Yes. That they weren't being treated for issues that they had that were in fact treatable because they were convinced that they had Wing-Turban syndrome.
Certainly that was his interpretation. That's all I can say about it.
All right.
It's easy to say it's treatable, but he didn't try to treat them himself, I assume.
You and Rick James have also associated people who had pre-existing conditions with your assumption that they're suffering from Wing-Turban syndrome, have you not?
Objection form, I don't think I even understand the question.
I'll rephrase it. It's, actually, as I was saying it sounded terrible. Let's be more specific. You have assumed that Mr. Schneldecker from Michigan is suffering from Wing-Turban syndrome, correct?
Some aspects of Wing-Turban syndrome, yes, I would assume that. Because it got much worse after the turbines came in.
If you could go to your slide number 3 in your presentation.
Okay.
And one of the things that you mentioned here is that you published a 3-part invited blog on hearinghealthmatters.org. Is that correct?
That's right.
I've handed you Mr. Punchlet that's been marked as Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 318. That's part 1 of that 3-part invited blog, correct?
Correct.
And in this blog, you and Mr. James attributed the Schnelldecker's health issues to the wind turbines, correct?
Yes.
And yet when you did that, you had no idea what their medical condition or history actually was, is that correct?
No, not really.
Oh, you didn't know what his medical history was?
No, I mean, I didn't know what his medical history was.
Okay.
We had not discussed his prior problems. I viewed some YouTube video, a YouTube video with him testifying before a hearing, and he certainly linked the onset of his most significant problems to the sighting of nearby wind turbines.
He linked it.
He did.
Have you ever spoken to a medical professional, a licensed physician, who linked his symptoms to something called wind-turbine syndrome?
I'm not sure there is such a person. No.
Okay.
I haven't.
Let's go to the, you mentioned a little bit ago the World Health Organization. Slide 22 of your presentation.
Okay.
And this is where you talk about annoyance and health, and you link up a couple of different definitions from the World Health Organization. Do you see that?
Yes.
Has the World Health Organization accepted your suggestion?
I'm accepting their suggestion.
I'm asking if they've accepted your linkage of those definitions.
I'm trying to interpret what they're saying about it. I'm not, I mean, certainly they have not contacted me, or I've not contacted the World Health Organization to ask them if this is a correct statement, but I'm trying to do my best to interpret what I think they're saying in terms of the relationship between annoyance and health.
Since you seem to be familiar with what the WHO has published, have you ever heard this statement? Or have you ever heard them acknowledge the possibility that noise annoyance does not significantly contribute to disability and hence should not be taken into account when considering the noise-induced burden of disease? Does that sound familiar?
No, it does not sound familiar. May I repeat the middle part of that slide as being hopefully addressing the question. They define health since 1948 as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And they've stuck to that definition since.
Let's try it a different way. Mr. Chairman, I know it's a little bit after 7:30. You want to keep going, or do you want to take a break now? I don't have a whole lot left, but it's up to you.
Why don't we just keep going?
Okay. Mr. Punch, I've handed you what's been marked as Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 295, and I'll represent to you, it's actually an excerpt from UCLC Exhibit 37, which is the 2009 WHO Night Noise Guidelines for Europe. Some of this looks familiar to you, doesn't it?
It is.
Okay. And then if you could pull up on your screen your slide 69.
Okay.
And that's where you summarize both the WHO limits and what they say about the potential impact on people at various decibel levels, correct?
I tried to say it in one slide, summarizing it in that sense to save space. It's
Right.
from table 5.4, I believe, 5.4.
It is? All right. And that table 5.4 is on page 108 of that Exhibit 295 that I handed you?
Yes.
Are you aware that the state of Illinois has its own daytime and nighttime noise limits?
The state itself.
Yes.
Objection to the article.
If you know that, if you can answer it, if you don't.
I know there are states that do. I wasn't sure about. I had not read that in conjunction with this hearing.
This is just going to be if you've ever seen these. Mr. Punch, I've handed you what's been marked as Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 226. Have you ever seen this before?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I've seen something like this from other places, but I've not seen this particular document.
Well, let's go back to the WHO guidelines, the WHO guidelines. Pleasant Ridge 295. The levels in Table 5.4, those are annual average outdoor levels, correct?
They are.
And are you also aware that the WHO guidelines address outdoor to indoor corrections?
Yes.
And that's for converting the outdoor numbers to indoor numbers, right?
Yes.
Okay. And if you look on the bottom of page 9, do you see that it lists a 15 dB correction with windows open?
Yes.
And then at the top of page 11, talks about a study that found 10 to 15 dB with windows open. Is that right?
I'm sorry, page
11. Top of page 11.
Yes, I'm aware of this. But again, this is not related to wind turbine noise.
I understand. And then in the end, the WHO went with a windows open correction of 21 dB on average, and that's in table 1.4 on page 11, right?
Yes.
Okay. So let's say, for example, that we have an outside measurement of 41 dB at 1,000 hertz. According to the WHO, if we then go inside, we deduct 21 dB, resulting in an indoor level of 20 dB, right?
According to these numbers, yes.
Okay. And then if we go back to your slide 69, according to the list you duplicated from the table in the WHO guidelines, that's at well below a level that results in no substantial biological effects. Is that correct?
Both this and my slide relates to non-wind turbine noise.
That's not my question, sir. So
Well,
my question is, if you end up at an indoor level of 20 dB, according to the World Health Organization, you are well below the level that results in no substantial biological effects. Is that correct?
with normal transportation noises and that sort of noise, yes.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and take, let's take 10 minutes. I've got 7:37, so we'll get going again at 7:47. From the audience for you. At this point, I'm looking for any interested parties in the audience that may have questions for Mr. Punch. One individual over here, if you want to, okay, yeah, if you want to go where Mr. Luke Hans is at, and you're going to need to state your name for us.
Is this caramel? Coffee and stuff in there. Well, this is almond. Like, if it's chocolate, I care, but it's... That's okay, it's some beans. It's coffee and caramel.
All right, can you please just let us know, state your name for us?
John Hayes.
All right, thank you. You may go ahead.
Good evening, Dr. Punch. Good evening. I'd like to start with a question relative to my experience, because it was brought up about sleep apnea, and that is something that I have. It was easily diagnosed and extremely easy to treat.
Mr. Chairman, is this
No,
person
I'm sorry,
asking a
I'm
question?
sorry. You're right. I apologize. Are you aware that sleep apnea is easily treated?
I know it's treatable. I don't know how easily it's treatable, but certainly I know people who've gone through sleep studies and been treated.
All right, that'd be fine.
Mr. Hayes, can you speak a little closer to the microphone? They're having some trouble hearing you.
That better?
Yeah. Okay.
To start with this particular question, Dr. Punch, does a person have to be a medical doctor to understand peer-reviewed articles on wind turbine noise?
No, I don't think so. Or any other subject, really.
Okay. Could someone other than a medical doctor determine the validity of conclusions of a peer-reviewed article or study on the health effects of the wind turbine?
I would hope so. I mean, I've done a lot of research in my own field over the years and taught a course in research design, and I hope I've become pretty adept at being able to interpret other kinds of articles. Not that I understand all the technicalities of those articles, but I can understand that the design is weak, if it could have been done in a different better way and that sort of thing. But it doesn't take a medical doctor necessarily. Many medical doctors don't do research, as you know, they're in clinical practice. They don't really deal with research on a day-to-day basis. Some do, of course, but people in practice typically don't. And maybe some do, some both. But you don't have to be a medical doctor to answer your question, I think.
Okay. If a person retires from the profession and does not keep up their certification, do they immediately become incompetent in their field?
Are you talking about myself, or I'm certified, by the way? We went through this last time I was here. Maybe you're talking about somebody else, but are you referring, may I ask, are you referring?
I'm referring to anyone. That could include me as a retired teacher.
Well, to that extent, Mr. Chairman, I think that's, I won't say beyond the scope, but there's no foundation for this witness to be able to know in what field certification may or may not matter.
All right. Why don't you move on from that question? Can you go to the next question for me?
Yeah. Okay. If a lawyer retires and is no longer licensed to practice law, would you consider him to no longer be able to understand legal issues?
I got the same objection, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, if you can try to hone in on his specialty, questions relating to that, please.
Dr. Punch, are you familiar with the Cape Bridgewater Wind Farm study by Stephen Cooper?
I am.
Okay, I'd like to pass out some copies of this.
I don't need it. Unless a specific question comes up on a certain page. Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what the witness just said. I apologize.
Yes, we're referring to page numbers, so Dr. Punch would be wise to have that. Dr. Punch?
Yes.
Why was this study not included in your original presentation?
I only learned about it when I got back home after January 22nd. I don't think it was released until about that time, about a week after that, I think. But it was actually dated November 2014 and was not released. My understanding is let me get this to my understanding, that there was a lot of discussion about the release of the report and when it should be released and so forth. So I wasn't aware of it at that point, and it really wasn't available until about a week later.
Would you agree that the what I call the Joint Cape Bridgewater study by Pacific Hydro, that would be the wind farm owners, and Stephen Cooper offers new evidence that infrasound emissions from turbines does exist and is associated with adverse health effects?
Objection, foundation.
I don't even understand the objection foundation, because my witness. He has an opinion, if he has an opinion about it, he can give it.
Right. You are familiar with this study. You have previously reviewed the study.
I reviewed the study. I've read the executive summary, I've read the conclusions, which are both pretty long. I've read parts of the narrative, 235 pages. I've read parts of it. I haven't read the word of the main. I don't think anybody has at this point. There were 6 volumes of appendices. I've gone through the appendices to see what kind of information is in there. I haven't obviously read every word of those either, but I'm kind of aware of what's in the report.
Okay.
What the main findings are, the implications as I see them.
Mr. Cornell, if I may, I think I can resolve this potentially.
Okay.
Mr. Hayes can ask him whatever he wants, but since this is brand new, it wasn't included in anything that Mr. Punch said previously, I would like the opportunity, once he's done with this, to ask some follow-up questions of Mr. Punch with respect to what Mr. Hayes is doing.
Objection. This isn't my witness, these aren't my questions. I mean, my witnesses aren't my questions. If I was going to do that, maybe then. But this is a question from the audience. To allow every question from the audience to have follow-up, when they hit something new, we're going to be here a long time, and we've been here long enough.
In sticking with our procedure that we have previously followed, I guess your opportunity may be in a rebuttal.
That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you. I just called you judge, I'm sorry.
Would you like me to read the question again, Dr. Punch, or?
I understood your question to be whether I regard the study to be an indication that infrasound from wind turbines are a direct cause. Did you use the word direct in your question? Is there a cause effect related to wind turbine noise and adverse health effects?
Yes.
I don't know if Cooper used the term adverse health effects. He steered away from that, from viewing this as a medical study, because he is an acoustician. He's a well-regarded, renowned acoustician. But although he steered away from it, as you know, if you read the report, he deals with sensations to be an umbrella term to describe feelings, perceptions of things like even headaches, pressure in the head, tightness in the chest, I believe tinnitus, and what I would consider adverse health effects, but he was again careful not to describe those as adverse health effects. Just simply discomfort, uncomfortable, unwanted sensations, as opposed to medically diagnosing those symptoms as medical issues, okay?
Okay. On the, in the study that you have a copy of there, it's not a numbered page, but it's about the 5th page in. It's called Acknowledgement on the top.
Yes.
The last paragraph states the following. Without the assistance of the 6 residents, the wind farm manager, who provided essential data and assistance on site, and Pacific Hydro, who initiated and funded the study could not have occurred. All of these people need to be acknowledged for their participation in the study. Would it be fair to say that this study was a joint effort by the wind farm owners and the residents of the wind farm to better understand the nature of the noise complaints of some residents?
Objection. There's no foundation for this. This witness can't possibly know what Pacific Hydro's role was in this study. And an acknowledgement by the author doesn't indicate that.
Mr. Punch, do you have any direct knowledge of that information? Do you have any direct knowledge of Pacific Hydro and their holdings?
And their holdings?
Their interest. What is their interest within this?
I think based on what the report says, I have a direct knowledge. I don't have direct information from the company, obviously, but only what I read in the report.
Okay.
That's not direct knowledge, Mr. Chairman.
And since when is direct knowledge an issue in a zoning hearing? I mean, we've taken this to a whole nother level. He's had many experts testify to what's in reports. To now say that this expert, because he doesn't like the report, has to know everything that's in it is ludicrous.
First of all, the suggestion that I don't like the report is incorrect. I think the report is actually intriguing, but we'll get to that in
If you want to
rebuttal.
testify, Mr. Blazer, feel free later.
We'll get to that in rebuttal, but my point here is the question as asked is asking for Mr. Punch's personal knowledge. If the question is simply, have you read this in the report? I'll stipulate that he's read the report and it says what it says.
All right, let's just all stipulate that paragraph is correct, and we'll move on to the next one.
There.
Move on to the next question, I mean.
Okay. I'm going to read the next question. In your opinion, did the venture between Stephen Cooper and the wind developer Pacific Hydro produce results that could be considered unbiased?
Objection, Foundation.
Well, it's an opinion question. I mean, he's going to object to every question that the public is now asking. They ask the question, let them answer the question. There's no foundation objection for an expert. He's read the report.
Mr. Punch, can you answer that question?
My opinion is it's unbiased. It's independent acoustician who, as indicated in the report, describes a study that was done with full cooperation, probably for the first time in history of the wind company, in terms of shutting down and turning on the turbines.
Would you turn to the next page, please, Dr. Punch, under the executive summary?
There are page numbers up at the top of the page.
Yeah, this is page I.
Page.
Page I.
Okay.
I'm sorry, the page I.
Okay.
What I'm calling the third paragraph down starts with the word despite. Like that?
Yes.
I'm going to read that. Despite the wind farm satisfying the acoustic criteria nominated on the permit, the operator of the wind farm, Pacific Hydro, is in receipt of noise complaints from residents in the proximity to the wind farm. Dr. Punch, what does this paragraph mean?
Objection. What it means, it says what it says.
Can I get
Mr. Punch, go ahead and answer.
my opinion in terms of what it means? The way I interpret it is that Cooper is saying that the reason he did the study was because the wind farm, after receiving a number of complaints from the residents near the wind farm, after 6 years of the wind farm's operation, the study came into being because the company finally agreed that this needs to be done.
Thank you. On the same page I, the fifth paragraph, it starts with the word following discussions. Following discussions with the residents in late 2013, permission was given by the residents for access to their properties to undertake acoustic testing, both inside and external to dwellings, in addition to Pacific Hydro permitting measurements on the wind farm to investigate noise and vibration emissions from turbines and the substation. Dr. Punch, why is it important that sound and vibrations be measured inside the houses?
Because that's where people live. A lot of the complaints, at least worldwide, in general, have been sleep disturbance at night. That's where people live, and many complain that it's worse inside than outside.
Okay.
Okay.
On the same page, page I, the last paragraph, before that, also on this page somewhere. Stephen Cooper labeled this term sensation as including headache, pressure in the head, ears, chest, ringing in the ears, heart racing, or sensation of heaviness. In the third paragraph, the study found that the diarized, I don't think I pronounced it right, residents' observations identified sensation as a major form of disturbance from the wind farm. So that term sensation refers back to what I mentioned earlier. My question for you is, or first of all, are you aware that some of the local residents have testified that they have experienced similar sensations during visits to nearby wind farms?
Some of these residents?
No, some of the potential residents, or some of the people who live in this proposed Pleasant Ridge wind farm have gone to neighboring wind farms to experience, to see what it's like, and some of them have testified that they've had similar sensations.
I am aware of that, yes.
Would it be fair to say that you would expect some wind farm visitors to experience sensations?
Of this type, yes.
All right, page II. Okay, the sixth paragraph. It starts with the study found. It has some bullets under it. The study found a pattern of high severity of disturbance to be associated with 4 different operating scenarios. The wind farm being 1, when turbines were seeking to start, and therefore could drop in and out of generation, an increase in power output of the wind farm in the order of 20%, a decrease in power of the output of the wind farm in the order of 20%, and 4th, the situation when the turbines are operating at maximum power and the wind speed increased above 12 meters per second.
Mr. Chairman, in fairness and for the sake of completeness, I don't think this makes any sense unless Mr. Hayes reads in the entire section under what the study found, starting with for one resident.
I'm sorry, I missed where you
Mr.
said.
Blazer has taken many studies and taken pieces out of them. And this isn't his witness.
And Mr. Lucahands has repeatedly objected, and the chairman has repeatedly directed the witness to either read the entire section or require me to read the entire section.
No, that was only on impeachment and actual transcripts, not reports, because I was not able to do that in report.
All right. Why don't both? All right. In the interest of fairness, we will read the entire portion thereof that does relate back to that. So we need to go back up. How far back do we need? Do we need to get at least?
I think just the bolded part, Mr. Chairman, where it starts, the study found that the diarized residents, that's the section that Mr. Hayes had started reading, and then he went off to a different paragraph.
Okay. And then all the way down through that?
I think that would be fair.
Okay. Mr. Hayes, do you want to read? Why don't you read from the bold, the study found, or I guess I can read it, whatever we need to do. And then to the portion that you've already read.
You want to read it? Or?
All right. The study found that the diarized residents' observations identified sensation as the major form of disturbance from the wind farm. For one resident, sensation, noise, and vibration were observed with the wind farm shut down. While the study found for the 6 residents that there were no direct correlation between the power outputs of the turbines and the residents' diary observations with respect to noise, it found a trend between high-level disturbance, severity of sensation,
and changes in the operating power of the wind farm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, now redirect your question to Mr. Punch and we can move on.
All right. Dr. Punch, are these findings new proof that turbines cause sensations?
A cause-effect relationship. The operation of the wind turbines directly relate to these sensations that people diarize or wrote in their diaries. And rate it, by the way, from 1 to 5.
On page Roman numeral 4, the first paragraph. By including narrowband analysis in the description of the acoustic environment, the study confirms that the infrasound obtained in a wind farm affected environment is different to that in a natural acoustic environment. My question is, does this statement indicate with some scientific certainty that there's a difference in the infrasound around an operating turbine as compared to the infrasound when the turbine is not operating?
Well, I think this statement really means, in my view, that the measurements that have been traditionally used to measure wind turbine noise are not distinctive in differentiating natural environments and wind turbine noise environments. So the C weighting scale, the A weighting scale, the A has been the most traditionally used. There are some studies that relate to, for example, annoyance, dose response annoyance and so forth. But all I think he's saying here is that it took narrowband analysis, including the very, very lowest frequencies, a close look at those frequencies to be able to distinguish between the sound made by wind turbines and the sounds made by natural environment. Maybe that's a little different or close to what you were saying, but that's how I interpret it.
Thank you. On page 186, the last paragraph that's in the orange, utilizing the Cape Bridgewater narrowband results superimposed onto the 1/3 octave band results show there is a difference between the natural environment and wind farm affected environment in the infrasound region. Therefore, one cannot claim that infrasound levels in the natural environment are similar to that of a wind farm affected environments. My question is, does this statement in the Cape Bridgewater study contradict earlier testimony based on 1/3 octave band results that natural background infrasound, non-operating turbine, and the background infrasound of an operating wind turbine are nearly the same?
Convoluted question. I'm sorry, I can't.
Well, I could try to.
I don't mean the question. I'm sure you know what you're saying. I'm just not quite getting the gist of it. The the substance of the question. How is it different from the previous question?
How is it different than the previous question? It's probably getting to what I found in the study, that where the 1/3 octave band study, which was presented earlier in testimony earlier, that basically said there was no difference between background infrasound and an operating turbine and with a non-operating one. That basically there is no difference. It is for practical purposes. But in the study I found where that statement that basically says if you superimpose the 1/3 octave band on a graph with the narrow band analysis, that you...
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I recognize Mr. Hayes.
Can you at least finish?
I recognize Mr. Hayes isn't an attorney, but now he's testifying as to his opinion of what this report says. He's testifying as to what he thinks prior testimony in this proceeding has been.
Well,
it's just inappropriate.
He has the absolute right to testify as to what he thinks prior testimony.
He has no right to testify. He's questioning.
To ask the question. The witness asked him a question. He's trying to clarify it, and I think that's proper. It's clearly proper. So all he's doing is trying to clarify the question the best he can. He's not an attorney. This is the public. Mr. Blazer keeps thinking it's me.
We understand that Mr. Hayes is not counsel, and we do want to make it welcoming for individuals to speak. So, Mr. Hayes, we do want to avoid you testifying with evidence. I understand you're trying to point out previous testimony, but that gets really difficult if you can't get it exact, then you've testified.
Yes. I think we can move on from that. I think my point can come up later, I think, somewhere else in some of the material or question I'm going to ask Dr. Punch. It will come up, I think, again, maybe. So if I can't ask it very well, then I think I can still get the idea out there another way, maybe.
Okay, yeah, move on to your next question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Punch, relative to this study and other studies you've done, come across, when the residents were away from their dwelling in the wind farm, do you know if they reported a change in sleep disturbance, headaches, perception of pressure on the body?
Yes, they did. A diminution without absence, but certainly less severe, or disappearance.
Okay. Let's go back to page 8. It, I believe, is the second paragraph. This is what it reads. One of the houses is abandoned with the occupants being advising they reside elsewhere so as to be removed from the wind farm. In your search of the literature, have homes and other wind farms been abandoned?
Of course, yes.
Do you believe that if a home is abandoned, that it is something that's justifiable for under any circumstances?
Objection.
All right. That one's going to be a little bit beyond Mr. Punch's expertise.
On the same page, page 8, the 5th paragraph, it states the following, and I'm going to have to read the first 4 words and want to just tell you what that 4th word means. It starts out, all the residents And what that means in the context, that would be those who participated in this study, would not be all the residents of the wind farm. Indicated that over time, their sensitivity to noise from the wind farm has increased, and there's a regular occurrence of sleep disturbance to the point their health has been affected to varying degrees. Again, keeping in mind that in this case, the term noise is the same as sensations, which would be the headache, ringing in the ears, and those things we mentioned earlier. Dr. Punch, in your opinion, based on peer-reviewed studies, that the noise or sensation effects on some of the residents of the proposed Pleasant Ridge Wind Farm will be similar to the participants in the Cape Bridgewater study?
I believe that some will be affected, whether they're leasing land or not, depending on how close they are to the turbines and their individual sensitivities. Not everybody will, obviously, but some, we don't know how many. The percentages are not known.
Right. On page 214, the 11.1 non-acoustic findings. There are quite a few of them. Someplace I think I've lost something I've needed. Because I really didn't want to go through the whole thing there. Okay, I believe it would be the first bullet, the resident's observation and identification of sensation, separately to vibration and noise, indicates that the major source of complaint from the operation of the turbines would appear to be related to sensation rather than noise or vibration. Have you come across anything similar to this in other studies?
Well, first I'd have to say that in his study, the way he cast his design, the way he designed the study, given the purpose of the study, which was pretty well circumscribed, I think he probably wanted to stay away from noise and vibration because he couldn't directly measure. In fact, he experienced vibration himself, he said in one part of the report, and through the floor of one of the homes, or maybe more than one home. But he just didn't have time to measure it. So he didn't really directly measure vibration. So I think you're saying that he can't say that it was noise and vibration, but he can say it was sensation because this came up over and over again in the diaries.
Okay, here's a question that's going to ask for your opinion. After reading and studying this Cape Bridgewater study, I personally feel the most important fact determined by this study is that there now is definitive proof that wind turbines absolutely do produce or cause physical symptoms in some of the wind farm residents. The correlation of the severity of the sensations to changes in power output of the wind turbines when the reporting residents could not have known about power output changes proves that these sensations are real, not imaginary. Dr. Punch, do you agree with my opinion?
I agree wholeheartedly with your opinion.
Dr. Punch, are you aware of there are peer reviews for this Cape Bridgewater study?
Well, there are peers who reviewed the study and commented on it, yes.
I'd like to pass out some copies of the peer reviews.
Just want to briefly remind everybody in the audience as we're handing this out, just to try to keep it down in the audience while they're testifying. We're having a hard enough time here, and so if everybody would just keep it down for us, appreciate that.
Please. Okay. Can you find Dr. I believe it's Schumer's report? Peer review of the Cape Bridgewater study?
Is that what you just passed out?
It's one of them.
Yes.
It's a,
It was actually the second of two.
I apologize. Yes, that's, yeah.
It is one of them, but it's-
I passed out the wrong one. But you hang on to it because I was going to get to that one eventually.
All right, let the records indicate, we'll just clarify this very quickly. This Schomer article from Paul E. Schomer dated 20 February 2015, remarked that as Exhibit Hayes 2. Oh, strike that. We'll need to remark the Schomer 20th of February 2015 as Hayes 3.
I apologize for not getting that one labeled. This would be the February 10th Schumer summary. On the front page of the this peer review study, on the third paragraph, it starts out with 6 subjects, 3 couples. You got that?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to read that. 6 couples, 6 subjects, 3 couples from different homes are participants in this study. They do not represent the average resident in the vicinity of the wind farm. Rather, they are self-selected as being particularly sensitive and susceptible to wind farm acoustic emissions, so much that one couple has abandoned their house. Cooper finds that these 6 subjects are able to sense attributes of the wind turbine emissions without there being an audible or visual stimulus present. More specifically, he finds that the subjects' responses correlate with the wind turbine power being generated, but not either sound or vibration. Okay, Dr. Punch, in simple terms, does this paragraph state that wind turbines do produce sensations in humans, some of which might not be best for their health and could lead to home abandonment?
The last word was colleague to
I guess
I
I
have to object to the latter half of that question as to leading to home abandonment and health issues. Dr. Punch already testified that this report doesn't address health issues, and we've already determined he can't comment on what might or might not be an appropriate ground over in their house.
That's not, if you want to talk about home abandonment, I would agree. The rest of the question, while it could lead to adverse health effects, goes completely along with the rest of his testimony. And we would ask that there's no reason that it should be objected to.
Dr. Punch already testified that Cooper steered away from concluding health effects.
That doesn't mean that Dr. Punch could determine whether there were health effects based upon that.
Okay, the objection is well taken. The portion thereof with home abandonment is beyond the scope. The portion concerning the health, I guess he has testified that they did stray away from that rather sensation. So he didn't draw the correlation between health and sensation. Cooper in his original, and I might be misspeaking. It is Cooper. Yeah. So can you move on, Mr. Hayes, with that, or?
Yes. I mean, he can ask Dr. Punch whether he can make that statement. That's what he's asking. He's not asking what Cooper did. He's asking whether Dr. Punch has an opinion as to whether these sensations can lead to adverse health effects. And I think that's a fair question.
All right, Mr. Hayes, can you move on past this one? It's hard because, Mr. Lukans, it's hard to take the objection, or you're defending Mr. Hayes. Mr. Hayes is up here as a citizen, so we do give him some liberty in questioning. A lot of this, Mr. Hayes, may be a good opportunity as you testify to present a lot of this. I'm not sure.
Well, I certainly can move on.
Yeah, okay.
I can go on to the second page and the second paragraph.
Okay, yeah, move on.
And go to the second paragraph of this. And it starts out, this study finds that 6 people, since the operation of the turbines via other pathways than hearing or seeing, and that the adverse reactions to the operations of the wind turbine or turbines correlates directly with the power output of the wind turbine or turbines and fairly large changes in power output. In nearly all of the wind farm article studies that I have read, which is certainly not all of them, some of the residents that were in these studies or articles have reported adverse health effects. Could this statement by Dr. Schumer, which is based on the Cape Bridgewater study, that changes in output power by wind turbines result in an increase in the severity of reported health effects, also be true for other wind farms? Or could this be true for, all or most wind farms?
Same objection, Mr. Chairman.
He has the right to ask him about whether he sees adverse health effects coming out of this study. That's what he came in to testify to. He has the right to be asked that question. He has the right to ask that question and let the witness answer.
Okay, I do agree with that. Here's where we went astray, Mr. Hayes. You read that paragraph, and then there wasn't like a direct question right after that, and then you threw in some testimony. And I think that's where Mr. Blazer's objected, and he's somewhat founded in it. So you could read that, and then ask him if that is a legitimate based on his experiences. I can't help you testify, or I can't help you question, but at the same time, I can try to move this along as best as possible.
Could I ask him this question? I've read it, I could reread it. Could I just simply ask him, would that statement from this, Mr. Schumer's study, that was this study finds that the 6 people since the operation of the turbines via other pathways than hearing or seeing, and that the adverse reactions to the operations of the wind turbines correlates directly with power output of wind turbines and fairly large changes in power. Is that true for other wind farms?
I don't see why it could not be true for other wind farms.
Right?
One might argue of comparable output capabilities and same distances.
The third paragraph starting with the third sentence, which starts with the important point here is.
Yes.
The important thing here is that something is coming out of the wind turbines to affect these people, and that something increases or decreases as the power output of a turbine increases or decreases. Denying infrasound as the agent accomplishes nothing. It really does not matter what the pathway is, whether it is infrasound or some new form of rays or electromagnetic field coming off the turbine blades. If turbines are the cause, then the wind farm is responsible and needs to fix it. Dr. Punch, do you agree with Dr. Schumer's conclusion there?
I do. I've made a similar comment somewhere, I forget where. Certainly I believe that, yeah. I mean, he's making a pretty direct cause-effect statement.
Same page, fourth paragraph. It starts with the word some. It's a long paragraph. Some may ask, this is only 6 people. Why is it so important? The answer is that up until now, wind farm operators have said there is no known cause and effect relations between wind farm emissions and the response of people living in the vicinity of the wind farm, other than those related to visual and or audible stimuli, and these lead to some flicker, which is treated, and some annoyance with noise. The study proves that there are other pathways that affect some people, at least 6. The wind farm operators simply cannot say there is no known effects and no known people affected. One person affected is a lot more than none. The existence of just one cause and effect pathway is a lot more than none. It only takes one example to prove that a broad assertion is not true, and that is the case here. Wind farms will be in the position where they must say, we may affect some people, and regulators charged with protecting the health and welfare of the citizenry will not be able to say they know of no adverse effects. Rather, if they choose to support the wind farm, they will do so knowing that they may not be protecting the health and welfare of all the citizenry. Dr. Punch, you agree with this statement? Dr. Schumer.
I do. It's a very profound statement, I think. That's what a lot of people who are classified as anti-wind have been trying to say for a long time. And may I say that Dr. Schumer is one of the most respected acousticians in this country, and probably in this world, because he is the director of standards director at the Acoustical Society of America, which is the most reputable acoustics organization, at least in this country.
Thank you. There was a peer-reviewed study by Dr. Bob Thorne. It's a 2-page one. It starts up at the top. It says noise measurement services on it, dated January 21st, 2015.
Is that in your Exhibit 3?
That would be in Exhibit 2. Should be, I think it should be in Exhibit 2. Should be with,
was it renumbered 3? Is that what you're saying?
I don't believe I numbered number 3.
I'm sorry. Give me the name again, Thorne, or?
It's up the top. It says noise measurement services.
Okay. That's Bob Thorne, yes.
Yes.
Okay, I do have to know.
Okay. Okay, on page 2, the outcome listed as number 3 by Dr. Thorne is, so if we turn to that second page, it starts out, infrasound is firmly identified. Okay, infrasound is firmly identified as a standard and normal part of emissions of a wind farm. The character of the infrasonic emissions is identified as being measurably different from ordinary wind. That is, infrasound generated from turbines consists of trains of pressure pulses and must be measured through narrow band analysis and interpreted accordingly. Standard measures with third octave bands and G weighting are found to be not valid measures of wind turbine effective noise. Dr. Punch, do you agree with these findings?
I certainly, yes, I do. And he's referring to the what Cooper called the wind turbine signature, another WTS abbreviation, but it's a different abbreviation. The signature being an acoustic series of pulses that can be traced back to the blade pass frequency, the number of times the blade passes a tower, plus the first, I believe, 5 harmonics. And he calls that the wind turbine signature that should be used in future medical studies.
And let's see, the last paragraph on this same page, it starts out with the present. The present situation cannot continue without change. The report has raised hard questions for Pacific Hydro to discuss with the residents. It is to be hoped and expected that support is given for the next steps of resolving the issue of adverse effects and restoring individual amenity and well-being to its original status prior to the operation of the wind farm. Dr. Punch, which is better, preventing adverse effects of turbines before they occur or trying to fix them after they've occurred?
Well, I know a lot of other people who have said before, it's a lot easier than mitigation afterward.
Okay. Dr. Punch, in your opinion, what are the best or possible solutions to preventing adverse turbine effects before they occur?
Well, as I pointed out in my supplementary statement, which was entered, I think, as an exhibit earlier, in general, noise can be stopped at the source, at the receiver or the receptor, the person, the resident, or the pathway. And the only real thing, we've already talked here tonight about how it's nearly impossible or impractical to put barriers around the receptor, like the basement we talked about, you know, the cement basement. And the wind turbine industry has done some things to reduce the noise at the source, but as we all know, it's causing some problems in some people. So the only thing we can really do effectively is to make the distance longer between the source and the people.
Would not building at all be a possible solution?
Well, I'm not going to go into the anti-wind stance. I mean, if I'm going to be labeled that by other people, I don't want to say yes to that. But certainly, it would be a solution, okay? Everybody, I think, would agree with that, to that problem.
All right. Now I'm going to cause you a problem, Mr. Cornell. The next exhibit, I do have labeled as 3, but I maybe can just change it to a 4 or something.
All right, let me just get this clarified for the record. We need to mark Hayes Exhibit 4 and correspond that to the investigation of the acoustic impact of Pacific Hydro's wind turbines at Cape Bridgewater, Victoria, Australia. Participating residents statement, 21st January 2015.
Dr. Punch, on the front page of this, the third paragraph down, it starts with the inclusion.
Is this the, I'm a little confused about what document I'm
This
looking
is
for.
the,
I wasn't handed one just recently, and I was handed something earlier. I'm not sure if I was given what you're referring to or not. Is it this one?
Did you just hand that to him? No. Give him that one. That's that one I know. That one. She's got one. He doesn't have it.
So somebody said the 21st.
That's that. Now you have it. It would be the third paragraph down that starts with the inclusion. Now,
I must be on the
I don't want to testify.
Okay, I have number 4, yes.
Okay, so I think the title's been read, maybe. Anyway, the third paragraph starts out with this. The inclusion of sensation as a descriptor of an impact describes exactly what we have felt all these years. Although the screeching of the turbines when turning, together with the incessant thumping, is still noise that significantly and regularly disturbs us, especially at night. And for everybody that's out in the audience, I want to make sure that this is something that was presented by the 6 participants of the study, of the Cape Bridgewater study. They wanted to have some input into it, and this is what they, as an individual group of 6, had submitted. And this is one of the statements that they have made from the participants. And my question about the statement here from the participants, could the sleep disturbance that they referred to, could that lead to health or adverse health effects for these 6 residents?
Regularly disturbs us at night, I assume does mean sleep disturbance. And as I presented on January 21st, some evidence that there is evidence, well, NIH, I don't know if I talked about the National Institute of Health at that point, but the NIH certainly has something to say about what sleep does to our bodies and to us. The WHO, World Health Organization, has things to say about that as well. Certainly, most of us, I personally do have experience with inability to sleep sometimes, and I know it affects me, and I know it affects other people, and that's well documented. It can lead to physiological effects. Stress, cortisol levels go up, and so forth.
All right, and the 4th paragraph, which states, Mr. Cooper's report identifies there is a specific pattern of infrasound frequencies at Cape Bridgewater Wind Farm when it is operating, which are not present when the turbines are shut down. These infrasound frequency patterns are measured in our homes at levels up to 20 decibels higher than those at the Shirley Wind Farm in Wisconsin, recently declared to be a hazard to human health by the Town Health Board. Dr. Punch, should this statement by the residents of the Cape Bridgewater Wind Farm be of concern to the residents of the proposed Pleasant Ridge Wind Farm and the Livingston County Board?
Objection, beyond the scope.
Okay, that is beyond the scope of this witness. Can you move on?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Page 2, turn the page. The second and third paragraphs. The assertions made by others that our symptoms results from scaremongering, the nocebo effect, are untrue and always have been. The inclusion of complete shutdown periods of the wind farm facility during the investigation reminded us of the general peace, serenity, and well-being of our lives before the wind farm facility started operating. The investigation also demonstrated that the current noise pollution guidelines operating in Victoria are useless and do not protect us from harm. Dr. Punch, what is the significance of these two paragraphs?
Well, I think it calls attention back to what most of us think, a lot of us think, that there are people who, even people with pre-existing conditions, can leave the vicinity of wind turbines and feel better. And it's been shown over and over that if you leave and feel better, you come back and you feel worse, and you do it over and over. This has happened many, many times, and I would say hundreds of times, at least, maybe more. It's like the crossover experiments that epidemiologists like to say is one of the best measures of cause-effect. If the timing, the synchrony between the activity, leaving or coming back, is synchronized with the effects, reactions, then there has to be some attention to the fact that it could be cause-effect. There's an article in 1965 by a gentleman who headed the Royal Society of Medicine in Britain, Great Britain. I believe his name is Austin Hill, who wrote a fine article about cause-effect. And you really don't have to have peer-reviewed epidemiological studies to know that it's cause-effect. Schomer and Hessler, in their second rebuttal, or comment on the Cooper study, talk about Schomer is a colorful character, and he talked about beans and gas. It doesn't take a doctor to know that if you eat a lot of beans, you might well have gas. But a doctor can tell you how and why it occurs. But you don't really need a medical doctor to tell you that the two are related.
On the same second page, paragraphs 9 and 10, again reminding people this is from the statement by the 6 residents. We thank Pacific Hydro for finally taking our complaints seriously and funding the study. We expect that they will now face the facts, difficult as they may be, and rectify the problems at Cape Bridgewater, address proper compensation for those who have been harmed, and indeed, lead the drive for reform of regulation of wind power facilities informed by the results of this investigation. We demand that the Victorian government do as the USA Brown County Health Department have done in respect to the Shirley Wind Project in Wisconsin and declare the Cape Bridgewater Wind Farm a hazard to human health. Take the necessary action to ensure our health is no longer damaged and restore our homes and habitat to its normal state. I'm going to ask the question. It's going to be objected to. You might as well get started. Dr. Punch, what actions could be taken by the Livingston County Board to prevent these events from happening with the proposed Pleasant Ridge Wind Farm?
Mr. Hayes, I'd have to agree with you. You're right. I object.
Beyond scope. That's beyond scope. Or witness.
Dr. Punch, are there other important conclusions or ideas, whatever, or from the Cape Bridgewater study that I might find helpful in understanding the health effects of wind turbines on families that have not been discussed?
Well, I think it's very hard to answer that question from a consumer point of view. The report is really written for wind turbine companies and acousticians in, I think, forging ahead with future studies. Certainly the conclusions they draw, that Cooper draws, are very germane, to the issue. But I took some notes thinking this question might come up, or questions like yours might come up. I need to kind of look through these notes, if I may take a minute, just to see if there's anything relating to your question. One thing that I'm sure has come up many times before is that, and I will reiterate here, is that infrasound is very different from other sounds in that it doesn't follow a normal attenuation as you increase the distance. Infrasound travels much further than other, even quote, low frequency sounds, or certainly anything higher than about 20 hertz, or even 200 hertz. Nobody, I think, these days disputes that wind turbines emit infrasound, and that infrasound causes the kinds of problems that I think Cooper has described. Would you repeat the germ of your question, the basic? Are there other things that, I forget the last question. But
This Cape Bridgewater study is very extensive. Just without the appendices, it was 235 pages.
Right.
And I went through it several times, and I looked for the things that I thought were most important. And I'm just asking you, was there something that you thought was important in there that I didn't ask about?
Well, I've already mentioned the wind turbine signature. That was one of the key bottom lines of the study, that is a way for acousticians to measure turbine noise, or sound emanating from the turbines. Cooper talked about weighting is not likely to be useful. If you want something that correlates to annoyance or even sleep disturbance, it's not a good measure to look for sounds inside a home, inside as opposed to outside. It's not good for distinguishing between when the turbines go on and off, necessarily. The wind turbine signature, of course, does distinguish those conditions. Or it's also not useful in distinguishing between wind noise in nature and wind turbine noise, particularly when the wind speed's relatively high. You're picking up too much. I mean, that's kind of looking at what's important for acousticians. And I think that was one thing that Cooper hoped would come out of the study. I would guess, having read most of it. If I may you have more questions, right?
I have just a few more questions. I don't think I'll take too long. There's a few more that are related
I'm not questioning the length of time. I just want to know whether I should hold a final comment, if I may, to answer some of the other questions.
You might just, hold off on that for a moment.
Okay.
All right. I have just a few questions still about this, about the study, and just recently came out. I came across some criticisms of Cooper's study, and the criticism was that he's not a medical doctor. Do you agree that that's a valid criticism for saying the study's no good?
We've already talked about that, I believe. My opinion is you don't have to be a medical doctor to interpret results that he found as related to cause and effect.
I gave you, I believe it's labeled maybe Exhibit 3. It's the second response by Schumer, I believe.
Yes,
The February 20th one.
I have it, yes.
Okay, there's and you may have already kind of hit on this anyway, but on the very first paragraph there, the last two sentences, this is not a medical study, and these are not medical conclusions. As predicted, this study is being made into something that is not. Maybe I should have read more of this so I'm not misleading anybody. I'm just going to read the whole paragraph so I don't mislead anybody. On February 10th, 2015, George Hessler and I warned that rather than making patently groundless arguments, something like an expert statistical analysis could be expected, proving that this is not a valid sample of the public at large, or proving the study did not do something else it was never intended to do. Now we see the assertion that this was a medical study and that Stephen Cooper, George and I are not qualified to make medical judgments.
Hold on. We're going to get you another battery.
But then you can't object. Of course I can. You know me better than that.
Go ahead, Mr. Reason.
Dr. Punch, we may have already covered this. I believe you may have already answered what was going to be my question, whether or not this was the fact that he wasn't a medical doctor, and I believe just what I read, it said it was not a medical statement, and I'll just leave it at that. You go ahead, if you've got some kind of answer to that other question I kind of asked you, what really I was asking, was there any kind of other concluding statements about the Bridgewater?
I think it was this, that Steve Cooper anticipated criticism from the wind industry even after the cooperation he got from them, given the results he found. He anticipated criticisms based on the number of subjects. It's not a statistically valid sample. That was said about Pierpont's work, who interviewed 23 people about the condition of 38 people, okay? It's been said about many other studies. But in research, there is a trade-off between the number of measurements you can make in a practical world, given funding and time issues, and the number of subjects. And I think he said it elsewhere in one of these two sets of comments that one is more than none, right? I mean, 6 is quite a few people when they're so consistently responding in the way they did. My final comment, I guess, or my feeling after having read the study is that after having done some research myself, is that this is one of the most astoundingly methodologically sound studies I've ever read. It is a, and I hope I don't have to come back to rebut, or for your rebuttal.
I'm done with you.
Good. It was just a very, very meticulously well done study. The appendices, if you go through those, you will see pictures of the setup of the equipment inside and outside the homes, He talked about calibration issues and how he took care of those. He talked about some barriers, including weather and the things that got in the way of some things he would have liked to have done. That's pretty sensible for him to do, I think, and it's very realistic. He talked about what people wrote in their diaries. He just wrote up a beautiful, almost unchallengeable study in that regard. And to think that you could test in the way that he or perhaps his colleagues helped him do this, in a much larger population is unfathomable. I can't imagine having to do that kind of work over many more subjects. So you can't do this kind of research with a lot of people, but at least he set out to accomplish a particular task. It was not a compliance study. It had nothing to do with compliance with the local ordinances and so on. He set forth methods that were replicable. He found some new discoveries, the wind turbine signature, that other people can use in the future, and I think he set a good pattern for future research. And the findings were, as you've read many of the findings in Schomer's report and from Cooper's report, are, I think, rock solid.
Okay. We're going to leave that at this point. I have a few questions for you. In reference to Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 269, the Michigan report.
Guidelines for, can you please? I think those were taken away from you, weren't they?
Well, maybe you can answer the question.
Yeah.
Let's just try that first.
Okay.
Mr. Glazer asked you questions about a Michigan report you were involved in titled Recommended Update of Sample Zoning for Wind Energy Systems, Pleasant Ridge, Exhibit 269.
Okay.
Do you recall that?
I do now, yes.
Mr. Glazer pointed out one or two sentences in the report saying that the report recommended a 45 decibel weighted noise level for wind turbines. Do you remember that?
I do.
Was that 45 decibel the actual recommendation of the committee that put out the report?
No, it wasn't. The report that you're referring to was never formally adopted in Michigan. We were stopped from our activity because we were recommending 40, and I think that's in this report. Subsequently, we did a minority report, which we also talked about last month. Somewhere in this report, we talked about 40 dBA as being the recommended value. Rationale for selecting 40 dBA nighttime outdoors on page 3. So that's what we selected. That's what the committee came up with. And when you work with committees, as you know, you have to compromise. And some of us were trying to get it to 35, but after being 55 for so many years, we thought 40 was a good compromise.
Is that 40 decibels the same that's in that we set forth in the Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 269? Am I confused?
I'm sorry, I can't say. I'd have to go back and look at that, what the definition of, the measurement conditions are and so on.
Okay.
I did look at that application, but I've forgotten that information.
The reports or studies that Mr. Glazer provided you, that'd be Dr. Punch, were they peer-reviewed? Because I've learned that some of them were not.
Many of them, or most of them. If you're talking about the January 22nd documents, no, they were not peer-reviewed. They did the peer-reviewed literature, put it that way.
Okay. Do studies sanctioned by local, regional, state, or provincial government bodies have the same basic objective as wind companies?
Objection, Foundation.
Yeah, that's going to be beyond its scope.
Punch. In your research, does the noise/infrasound seem to affect children or people with autism spectrum disorder?
There have been some folks who say it does. In my research, you mean my reviewed literature, essentially, yes. There's an early study by Phipps, not too early, 2007, that mentions autism. There's another study, now I can't recall the authors. There's at least a couple of places in the literature that refer to the fact that autistic children with, I guess the convention is today to call them on the autism spectrum, do they seem to suffer more than other children to noise in terms of their response to noise? And it's believed by a lot of people, at least, that they're more sensitive to noise. I have an autistic stepchild, and he's 45, and I know that to be true of him. It is documented in one study. I can't recall the authors. I wish I could, but it's pretty well documented in there. Oh, Krogh, K-R-O-G-H, in 2012. It's described pretty well in that document.
Okay. The study at the Shirley Wind Project in Wisconsin and subsequent declaration by the Board of Health, could you expand on the determination that it is hazardous to human health?
Objection, Foundation. He's already testified, he doesn't know what they did.
That is correct. He previously testified that he is not sure of the details.
In your presentation, I believe, you have said the majority who live near wind turbines do not report adverse health effects. Does that mean that at least 51% do not report? So up to 49% could be affected, and the statement would still be true?
Objection, calls for speculation. There's no testimony, there's no evidence that he knows what percentage may or may not be affected.
That wasn't the question. The question was, could up to 49% be affected and the majority statement would still be true? That was the question, that's all it was.
But then it calls for speculation.
Calls for what, math?
It calls for speculation.
It calls for math. 51-49, you and I can figure that out.
Calls for speculation.
Can you restate the question in any way that wouldn't be?
What's the speculation? You can't restate the question because there's no speculation to restate.
Okay, reread the question for us.
You have said the majority who live near wind turbines do not report adverse health effects. Does that mean at least 51% do not report? So up to 49% could be affected, and this statement would still be true. Do you believe it could be true and that there are some people who are affected whose complaints are never heard or made public?
The letter,
Again, it calls for speculation, Mr. Chairman. Does he believe it could be heard? It could be 99% and 1%. We have no idea. There's no foundation for this witness to be able to answer that question.
Okay, the first part is speculative. The second part could be taken as non-speculative. The part that dealt with, are there some that live with it and don't report it?
I believe so. Quite a few, possibly. Many of them are under contracts not to say much. That's my understanding. I've seen gag clauses, not recently, and I haven't seen anything about gag clauses in what would be in the application in this case. But people are discouraged, minimally, from bringing forth comments or negative reactions to wind turbines. In the early days, I don't know if it's still true, but I know they were also encouraged to be proponents of future projects.
Do studies show there's a difference between the noise from wind turbines and the noise from aircrafts, airports?
Yes, I thought I included a slide on that, but I didn't spend a lot of time on it, so you might have missed it. I believe I did early on in the presentation. Wind turbine noise is distinctly different and unique in a number of ways from other noises. If you look at the spectrum levels, particularly the intensity at different frequencies, wind turbine noise tends to have more infrasound than most transportation or even other industrial type noises or other environmental noises.
Are you saying that maybe the thumping sound that some people report and do hear from the turbines is different than the jet engines from an airplane taking off or landing?
Yeah, there's spectral differences. The thumping is a distinctive thing probably with wind turbines. Any fan will, in your home, a floor fan can have, it oscillates and it passes wires and other obstacles behind it usually and in front of it. And you get a little bit of that sense, but you don't get the three-blade thump, 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 the whoosh, whoosh, whoosh that you do with other sounds.
Okay. Regarding the nocebo effect, are there scientifically valid studies showing the physiological forces, showing that psychological forces are a major driver of perceptions of wind turbine noise?
I think I made a statement in my presentation that there aren't, in my opinion, there aren't scientifically valid studies to show that, although I do believe in the power of suggestion. If I divide up the room, let me just quickly do a little analogy. Divide up the room into people, and I tell you, I'm going to tell you about the effects of alcohol in the body. And I give you a set of instructions and you a set of instructions, and I use alcohol in one group and not the other, then that's a legitimate experiment because you're using the substance, right? You're using alcohol. And I do a measure of performance on it or an opinion survey of the effects and so on. But that's a very different study from saying, I'm going to give you out, I'm going to give, no, it's a very different study from saying, what I just said. I'm going to do a study where I tell you about either the adverse or the positive effects of alcohol, and I don't give either one of the groups anything. The group that's been told positively or negatively the effects of alcohol, what that will be, are probably going to show effects from the nocebo effect. But the problem with the studies that have been done, there was no alcohol, there was no infrasound. And I think the results would have been drastically different. And that's why I say I don't think these studies are scientifically valid. These Crichton et al. studies. There are two, there are actually three, one by Taylor that is fairly similar.
In the Cape Bridgewater study, one of the things that I took away from that was that it kind of disproved, in my opinion anyway, the nocebo effect by the residents writing down sensations when the turbines were increasing or decreasing in power or changing, and they didn't know that. Is that an example of what you're talking about?
In a way, the nocebo effect in that case is, well, they weren't really told anything. They came in experiencing the effects and complaining about those effects. So I don't think that was a nocebo study. I think the reference to nocebo, I believe it was in the Schomer-Hester comments, was the fact that they couldn't see or hear anything. And yet they experienced something negative. So they're denying that nocebo was any part of the reactions or the sensations.
Okay. Someone testified that when they are near turbines, there is pressure in their ears, head. Can this be explained scientifically?
The mechanisms are not really known, I don't think, by anybody. Some people think it's vestibular, it's probably inner ear, but there are also mechanisms in the body. The only senses, let me start that over. The basic senses of vision, hearing, taste, touch, and smell are not the only senses we have. The body is full of cells and organs that can sense through resonance, through acoustic energy, vibrations. I'll call them vibrations because anytime a surface moves in relation to another surface, that's sensing movement. So movement is at the heart of some of these perceptions, I think, and some of the explanations that are given by Alex Salt relate to that kind of movement. Todd, as was mentioned here tonight, talks about body bone conduction. Basically, he's saying it comes through bone conduction. If you intuitively, if you think about it, you would think that sound vibrates the head if it's loud enough, but it has to be really loud. It has to be really loud, even infrasound. So it's not a viable mechanism that I can support through my reading of the literature. But the body itself senses it. For example, the vestibular, the balance part of the inner ear is much more sensitive to movement, because that's what its purpose is, to determine position in space, than the inner ear, than the cochlea part of the inner ear. So, I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I think
It's complicated. We don't know. I think we don't know the exact mechanisms, but there are biologically plausible explanations out there.
I thank you for your patience with me. That's all the questions that I have. So I'll let someone else ask you questions.
All right, do we have anybody else in the audience with questions? Anybody out there? Do we have any questions? Let's have any questions? County Council? County? All right. Very good.
I wouldn't mind that. It's out of order.
How many?
1 million.
All right.
John Slagle. When Mr. Blazer was talking about Mr. Schindeldecker possibly having sleep apnea or some other medical condition, can you dispel that theory?
That the problem that
I have to object, I apologize, but he already answered the question and he testified that he doesn't know anything about Mr. Schindeldecker's medical conditions.
Okay. Do you know if he has those conditions when he leaves his house?
Same objection, Mr. Chairman. He already testified that he doesn't know anything about Mr. Schindeldecker's medical conditions.
That's not a medical condition question, it's a factual question. He may or may not have learned from an interview. And I guess the question is a real one that should be answered.
He did say he personally knew Mr. Schindeldecker.
Yes, and my understanding is when he leaves his home, he doesn't have the problems, or at least not nearly the severity of the problem. That's why he put his home up for sale. He knew that if he got away from it, he would be better. He'd get better. It would be better.
Okay. Would it surprise you to know that last week they turned off the turbines for 5 nights and we slept behind those nights?
No.
Objection, objection,
Is there anything else you'd like to say on this?
objection.
Not under the circumstances.
All right, Mr. Punch, Dr. Punch, I believe we've got through everybody for questions for you.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
all right.
Thank you.
All right, so it looks like we're going to be back here on Wednesday, 6:30, we're going to continue down the list of those previously signed up. We have a few that were on the list from last week that we'll go ahead and get to first, and then we'll go ahead and just continue down the list. So if you've signed up previously and you plan to testify, it's a good idea to start having yourself ready for the meetings. We may get to you. There's going to be fewer and fewer opportunities to pass at this point. So if you pass and we get through everybody, and we make it back to you on the same night, you pass again, you have missed your opportunity. So do come prepared. 6:30, Walton Center, Wednesday night. Then I need a motion to recess. Vitzum motions. Zimmerman seconds. All in favor? Opposed?
Yeah, yeah.